Thank you all for coming. This is our final installation of our conversation on culture for this season. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Conversations on Culture have been a monthly discussion series that have explored different areas of arts and culture in the region, nationally, internationally, and have taken the opportunity to engage audiences in intimate discussions with artisans, practitioners, and others. And today, we're so fortunate to have Jeremy Abbate from Scientific American. He is Vice President and Publisher of Scientific American, and longtime friend. And today's conversation, I won't go into it too much because Jeremy has a wonderful presentation that he's going to give and a discussion he's going to lead. But for a number of years, Jeremy and I have been discussing the impact and the interconnection of arts and sciences, and how the two are truly interdependent and really are essential to the fabric of not only our communities, but to the way we as human beings develop and establish relationships. So I'm really pleased and so grateful that you made the trek down to come talk with us today. So without further ado.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there a Facebook Live happening?
I think we're going to just go with YouTube today.
Okay, because if it's live, the censors need the 7-second delay in case there's a vulgarity. You never know. Thank you, by the way. I'm Jeremy Abbate. I am the VP and publisher of Scientific American magazine. I'm also a longtime former resident of Morristown, Exhibit A, my mother. My career in the world of art and media, and eventually publishing, my career in the arts started here, in this room. I studied the viola ever since I was 8. And my first recital, I was 11, in this room, 15 years ago. I also performed at the Perkins Day Cafe series in 2007 because I have been for several years a session musician. And I had an acoustic album out on a small record label, and I was performing to promote it. And I there was Morristown families involved in that series, and they asked me to do a concert in 2007, and that was right here in this room. So the Perkins cred goes way back, and there's one more Perkins cred I have to show you. My brother Jason, in 1977, won the Perkins pumpkin decorating contest. And this is an actual Perkins pumpkin you can take a picture of that. It's on loan from Christie's, and I am pretty certain that there is interest in a Middle Eastern businessman for $25 million on this. So let me first thank Kara Buss for inviting me here. You are a force of nature. You are a model citizen. You are an exemplary of what humanity can do. Thank you for what you do for Perkins, what you do for this community, what you do for your friends and your family and strangers. So my love for you goes back to 7th grade, and has not wavered at all. We're not going to go there, I mean, per se. So if I can keep it personal for a few minutes, again, or continue this in this vein, I get asked a lot where my trajectory to my career came from as the chief business and media officer of a legacy media brand. And I go to conventions and magazine publishers association meetings, and I talk a lot about it. And in every forum where someone asks me, to what do I attribute the path of my career, I will say with 100% certainty, my training in the arts. It is not any business course I took. It is not any journalism course I took. It is not the writing I've done. It is not the scientists that I engage with or the innovation sectors that I am involved with. It is the arts. It is because I emotionally, perhaps it's a need, but it is certainly a drive. It is that emotional connection you have when you are speaking, when you are creating content, right? For people, publishing is ultimately an act of communication. And if you don't communicate, you will not have an audience for. Publisher is the partnerships we do, the alliances we build as a science media brand, whether it's with television networks or whether it's the Gates Foundation. And when you are sitting across the room with a big decision maker at an organization, the fundamental thing you need to accomplish is an emotional connection. And that really is a large part of my job as the steward of the brand Scientific American, which by the way is 175 years old. It is the oldest magazine in the country. 175, yeah, and I'm not making that up. In fact, I'm gonna show you, Scientific American, as the chronicler of innovation in society since 1845, has fundamentally touched the arts in several ways. And I'll show you a couple of examples. And I also just want to kind of talk about scientists who have been fueled by the arts. And then I'm going to also talk about how art fuels not just scientists, but health. In my hand here is something less valuable than the Perkins badge. This is the first ever copy of Scientific American. This is actually a facsimile, so it's not, This is from 1845, August 28th, 1845. Oddly, my son's birthday, not 1845, August 28th. You can see what we concerned ourselves with in 1845 before there really was a Scientific American. In fact, the word scientist wasn't in vogue. It was still natural philosopher. History of innovation in this country was about agricultural technology and, of course, transportation. Here you see a train car, and the birth of the railroad was not just a major part of linking this nation, but it was also a huge part of the building of every other infrastructure that you see in this country. When the nascent telecommunications industry started and they had to put these telegraph poles somewhere, where are they going to put them? Well, they had already built these railroad tracks. So it was kind of a piggybacking innovation leap. But nonetheless, I digress. What I wanted to show you was that in Scientific American in 1845, we published poetry. And here's the first poem we published. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but it's called Attraction. And I will read a tiny bit, right? It says, "Attraction is a curious power that none can understand. Its influence is everywhere in water, air, and land. It keeps the earth compact and tight as though strong bolts were through it. And what is more mysterious yet, it binds us mortals to it." This is before atomic theory, by the way. Throughout the world of science, the world of art has played a huge role. I would actually dare to say they have been intertwined. And I want to just bring up one more anniversary. It is the year 2022. It is 100 years. It is the centennial of something pretty amazing in the world of health. And that is an innovation that has probably saved more lives than any other innovation. And I can think of penicillin and clean water as the other two. That was the innovation and the insight that was made by someone named Frederick Banting in 1922, or a few years before, but he was the discoverer of insulin. He put together the idea that insulin, if it can be extracted from animals, used as a way to treat diabetes. So before 1922, if you had diabetes, that was a death sentence. And in a very short period of time, not that there weren't innovations and incremental optimizations of this platform, but if you had diabetes before 1922, you had a death sentence. If you had diabetes after 1922, you had a serious condition, but a chronically managed disease. And to this day, it is still a huge, huge chronic disease. But that insight that Banting had with others, by the way, he won the Nobel Prize, and there's still, like all Nobel Prize winners, there's people that he aligned with to help this. But Frederick Banting was a painter, and he was actually a pretty good painter. In fact, he was one of Canada's most known amateur painters at the time when he made this discovery. And after he made this discovery, he lived his life very dedicated, not just to his doctor practice, but to painting. Unfortunately, he died young in an airplane crash just before his 50th birthday. But he attributed much of his scientific insight and powers of observation to his work as a painter. And he did oil paintings, he did watercolors, he did wood engravings where you burn the image in wood. And that was, a huge part of what fueled him. And there are many other scientists that have touched the world of health that have been profoundly influenced by the arts. We work with James Allison. He was a pioneer of what's called immunotherapy, boosting the immune system to treat cancer, letting the body almost heal itself. What he did was basically, his insight with others like Carl June, who's actually at Penn University, was to think about how they could take the quote unquote brakes off the immune system. James Allison, another Nobel Prize winner for that insight, is an avid harmonica player. I had the privilege of actually playing with him, me and guitar and he and harmonica, at a medical show. And he said that his life in music, absolutely, no doubt, has led to his ability to concentrate as a scientist, to make connections between things, to bring the world of art and improvisation to the world of innovation. It's that creativity that sparks productivity. And it's a theme in so many of the scientists that I've worked with and so many of the scientists that write for us. It really is a kind of an integral part. So, we were just talking earlier about the idea of separating STEM education and the arts. And you have science and math and technology, and then you have art and music. And in the practical world and in the minds of those who are curious about the world, they mix together. They mix together with such porous and fluid boundaries that you can't even distinguish in some ways between what is a scientific inquiry, which we all know is fact-based and it's testable, right? But the idea of improv, the idea of where insights come from, is an absolute artistic endeavor, in my opinion. And I've seen it in so many different people and in ideas. Keeping it personal, when I first came to Scientific American as a young whippersnapper, and I left the magazine, I came back a couple times, one of my first jobs was to create, those gifts you get when you renew a magazine and they say they're gonna send you something, like here's a phone, here's a sneaker phone. My first job was to create a new product as a gift for renewing subscribers. And I was looking in the archives of all the stuff we had published, and I said, what would be really cool is to do a special issue on all the stuff we've done through the years on science and art. So the first big thing I did to try to impress my bosses was create something called Science and the Arts. And it was a magazine, it was a 4-part series, eventually was a newsstand seller. Well, it got in the hands of someone pretty famous. And this person was someone who was actually, at the time, the host of a PBS show we did called Scientific American Frontiers. And the name of that host was Alda. And so as a young little whippersnapper, I'm in the office, I'm in my little windowless office down a hall, probably with no chair. And my boss says, Jeremy, you got to come to my office. There's someone who wants to see you. And I thought, oh no. It's some subscriber who I probably wrote a little note to saying, here's your extra August issue. You know, it happened. People would walk around New York and see our building and say, oh, I got to stop in and renew my subscription. It was crazy. And who would they call? This young kid. Hey, Jeremy. So I get in the office and there's Hawkeye. And he says, I'm not going to do an impression of Alda. Just want to thank you for this issue. Really, really inspiring. Well, Alan Alda went on to start an organization that is now part of its SUNY purchase, right? The Alda Center. And he teaches scientists how to communicate by using art and theater and improv. I'm not saying I gave him the idea.
But you did.
But I gave him the idea. Let's face it. Let's face it. And we've worked with him over the years. He was just at an event we did a couple of years, right before lockdown. We had an event at the American Museum of Natural History, and it was great to see him. And he's still a huge fan of Scientific American, everything we do. But art doesn't just inspire people and scientists. Art actually, there are the people that have insights into health, and there's health itself. And the brain and looking at what mechanisms drive health is a huge topic right now. We are working with the scientist Lee Hood, who invented technologies that really started the DNA revolution. He also founded the whole field of systems biology. He now has a company called Phenomics, right? Phenomics International. And they are steadfastly dedicated to tracking what makes us and keeps us healthy, what gets us sick, and who responds to what treatment. And they have delved deeply into this topic and have uncovered some of the most amazing research that is not about genetic medicine, although that's obviously a tool. It's not about, traditional small molecule therapeutics or even physical therapy, but of course exercise and all of that. It's been about the relationship between art, music, and health. What is a phenome? A phenome is like so your genome is all your genetic information, right? The human genome is all of our DNA and what we can glean from it. The phenome is everything else. It's your gene, but it's your environment, it's your behavior, it's stimulus that you engage with. And these wellness models are what phenomics concerns itself with. Every input that you come across has some significance. The studies that have been done on people that have engaged in the arts and the calming effect it has for anxiety, they have codified in many scientific studies, and I'm talking about journals like Nature and Science, music being played in operating rooms before surgery to calm both the surgeon as well as the patients. This is a fact I could not believe because I was reading it because Lee Hood sent it to us, but a review of 400 research papers conclude, this was by Daniel Levitin at McGill University back in 2013. They did a big meta-analysis of data. Listening to music was more effective in reducing anxiety prior to surgery than any prescription medicine. Any prescription medicine. Anxiety reduction by several different KPIs set up. I just think that's amazing. And if you read the works of people like Oliver Sacks, who dedicated his life to neuroscience, neurobiology, but the interplay between art, music, the brain. His book, by the way, Musicophilia by Oliver Sacks is one of the best books you'll ever read in the world of science and art. I suggest everyone read that book. It's just amazing. I mean, I was very much moved by the power of music, being a musician myself, but when I saw its effects on people, particularly family members. I had an aunt that got Alzheimer's very early. She lost her ability to speak and remember things, and she, I remember one time playing Over the Rainbow for her on my guitar, and she sang the song, every lyric, start to finish. That engagement and that part of the brain to unlock the mechanisms of memory, the mechanisms of connection, that is more than just, right? That's more than just art. The healing power of music has been explored by philosophers, Aristotle, Pythagoras, even Pete Seeger, but it is being validated by medical research all the time. And there are more studies that talk about the experience of art. There is an amazing PBS documentary. We were talking about this a little while ago. It's called I Remember Better When I Paint. And it was a PBS, I think it was a Canadian-produced documentary. It was originally, went to PBS here. I Remember Better When I Paint is an incredible documentary. And I saw it a few years ago, but I need to rewatch it. And they explore the engagement in visual arts, people going to museums, and what it can do for anxiety, for your brain, for remembering, for having more focus, more concentration. And it, again, opened up a whole avenue of exploration in the world of science to better codify what is this connection between health and art. And it is something that comes across, we are considering as a media brand, is there something here that's more than just, a special topic, but I mean, could we, this topic is getting bigger by the day. And so, art as a value in the world of health, art as a value as a springboard for innovation in science and for inquiry, art as a tool to inspire students to think laterally and creatively. There is no wrong answer in art. And if you can get kids to grab onto that, they will apply that same creative solutions-based problem solving to things where might be a right answer, but you're going to get to it in your own creative way. And that is why this whole idea of STEM has to be STEAM. It's not just that you're throwing art into the mix for art's sake. You're throwing art into the mix because that inspirational aspect, that emotional aspect, that drive of improv and creativity is fundamental to how you can think like a problem solver. Not just a scientist, but any problem, anything that requires productivity. But I do want to talk about art in the community, because that's a huge, isn't that what we're here to talk about too? Isn't that what you do?
A little bit, we do it.
And I would say it's one of the fundamental missions that you have, building a community around art. We work with, we're starting to work with the Knight Foundation. And if you don't know what the Knight Foundation is, they support journalism, they support entities that are about helping to foster free expression and democracy. I mean, they're a major force in the world. And I met the president, Alberto Ibarguen, a few years ago. They are very much committed to supporting community-based art as a way to foster strength, community relationships, ties to one's community. They did a study, they commissioned a survey with the Gallup people, the pollsters. And I want to get this right here. They interviewed 43,000 people in 26 different communities in America. And their simple question was really, what attaches you to the place you live? What binds you and makes you feel like you are connected to this community? Overwhelmingly, they found artistic, socially engaging offerings beat out what was expected, which was education, job market, right? Which are obviously important. It was the cultural engagement that generates that social capital, strengthens the community. And they found that overwhelmingly, in fact, it has guided their funding of community art in places that in some ways are very underserved, in places where you start a community, whether it's a place to have practical experience in art or to appreciate art, And they have found major amplifications of those benefits, whether it's more consensus building, whether it's just neighbors understanding each other better. I mean, and again, there's more work to be done to really understand what this is capable of in terms of its efficacy societally. But it starts with that artistic experience. It starts with that emotional connection. And so this launched, I mean, again, a program. I think Alberto said in over 10 years they've given $270 million to artists and institutions in about 8 cities across America. And the program continues. Dance groups, concert halls, hands-on painting programs, even things like puppeteering, teaching kids comedy. You think comedy isn't an art? Comedy is an art. I have run huge meetings with stakeholders in different parts of the world, and when you start by having everyone tell a joke, force them to tell a joke. Don't look at me like that. I'm not going to ask you to tell a joke. I've started meetings when no one says anything. We just do introductions, and it's hi, I'm Larry, and I'm Sarah. But when you start a meeting, and you have people kick it off with an artistic endeavor that connects them emotionally. And I've done some funny things. I've asked them to draw pictures. I've been involved in other things, like this. When there's an artistic endeavor that starts it off, the community that you feel, the collaboration, particularly if it's a meeting when you're doing whiteboards and you're trying to be productive, if you start it with art, you find the output is, I'm going to say, probably 300% better. People are more engaged with each other. They appreciate each other. I mean, it's, again, you feel a connection. And I don't know if that is ever able to be completely scientifically codified. But think about theater groups you might have done in high school. Those are lifelong connections. And I'm convinced it's because you experience with other people the danger of improv, right? You went through that together. You had an emotional experience that is, I think, completely long-lasting. And I think that collaborative effort is what really does stick. And it sticks mentally, and it sticks behaviorally, and it's something that, again, it's a glue. It is an absolutely community glue. We have a saying at the magazine, because we're always presenting information, right? And that's both an art, and it's certainly, journalism is about facts. But facts are meaningless. When you need people to engage, you need them to be emotionally engaged. I'll go back to that, right? So the phrase we have is science fascinates, art sticks. We tell stories. We tell stories with facts, but we also tell them with art. What do we remember most about the inauguration? Sorry, not Joe Biden, not Bernie's mittens, the poetry of Amanda Gorman, right? That is what we all talked about and we all think about when we think about that event. The value of the A, how we put that A in STEM, how it becomes STEAM, is an ongoing process. And it's not this simple, the STE and the M, you can say those are categories. Those are, right? But the A is, I think, in the middle there, and I think essential. It's an essential component. Emotionally, creatively. There is a quote from Kurt Vonnegut, and I'll get it wrong if I don't read it. To practice any art, no matter how well or badly, is a way to make your soul grow. So do it. Do it. The implications of it, profound. And so what we're involved in right now at the magazine is to say, how can we embed art more into things we do? How can we shine a light more on the world of health, the world of art? I take, as part of my own mission in this endeavor, a phrase and a definition from the World Health Organization's charter from 1946, when it reads, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So if you take that as your fundamental definition of health, if you take that as your fundamental definition of, how we are going to make people well, you have to consider the power of what art does, the soul of learning. So, whether it's getting kids to think about that there is no right answer, getting people to see that emotion is such a part of science, and it's such a part of what drives it. The humanities have the word human, right? And what does science do? It serves humanity. We started again with the civil engineering feats of the 19th century, and it transformed, of course. The 20th century was really humanity's war on disease, right? And all the transformative technologies. I think the 21st century is about de-siloing those so we can address the needs of the future. And whether that is looking at what artificial intelligence can help us with and making sure that that intelligence is informed by, human intelligence. In the 1950s and 60s, the biggest beneficiary of computer technology was physics. It was the nuclear age. And the biggest change that happened in the late 90s in the world of bioinformatics was that computers and computing technology is mainly now in the service of biology, to plumb the depths of our epigenetic self, to understand how we live, why we get sick. And that's great, but it's certainly not enough. Those inputs are going to rest alongside of everything else we do. And that's the relationships we have, it's the exercise we do, it's the mental health that we do. So I see under that banner that A in STEAM, and that is so much a part of it. It's so much a part of how we are linked as a human race. And if this 2+ years of the epic that we've just lived through hasn't given us anything, it's to tell us, gee, we are inextricably linked, our fortunes as a global health population. Global health used to be a term that sounded like the other, right? What country are you helping? Sure, I'll give you money. That was global health. Global health is this. It's here, it's now, and it is again a fundamental, I think, underscoring of our fortunes as a race, as a living race, and with every other living creature. And by the way, the earth is a living thing itself. How are we stewards of this planet and our race, and how can we do it better? How can science and technology, without judgment or divisive politics, serve our collective needs? How can it be more equitable? How can science eventually, innovation, which is bright, new, and shiny, and very expensive, most of the time, how does that get democratized? On that path, every step of that path is emotion, it's connection, it's identification. It's understanding that every data point has a face, right? And that is why it is a fundamental part of what we do as a brand, what I do professionally, and certainly has driven me personally. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the arts.